Call the meeting to order and welcome everybody to the January 21st meeting of the Temple Terrace City Council. It's nice to see everybody out on such a frigid, cold, miserable night. I did see a picture on the internet before I came here of a Florida Highway Patrol trooper's car in front of the Welcome to Florida sign, all covered with snow. The sign and the car are all covered with snow. So I'm assuming that was not made in Fort Myers. It must be up in the Panhandle somewhere, but hopefully they will keep that up there. So welcome again, everybody. Please remember to silence your electronic devices. And if you would, please stand and join me in the invocation and the pledge. Lord, we ask you to bless our great nation as we embark on a new chapter in American politics. Help us to govern ourselves according to the high ideals of justice and liberty enshrined in our Constitution. Help us to rise above our ideological differences and unite in the cause of freedom, so that this country may be a beacon of hope for people throughout the world. We pray in a special way for our longtime city lobbyist, Louis Betts, who passed away last night. Look with favor upon his soul, Lord, and grant his family peace and comfort during this difficult period. Bless our meeting tonight. Grant us wisdom and compassion as we continue our work to advance the common good. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. So for those of you visiting us tonight, we begin our meetings with a kind of a new tradition. A year or so ago, we started doing this. So we open our meetings with a very brief but fun or historical or interesting fact about our city or the area. And so we rotate that duty around. Tonight it falls on me. But me being a good delegator, I have, upon request of the city attorney, I have yielded to her, and she's going to provide the interesting or fun fact tonight.
I want to start my visual aid. You can pass that around. What I'm going to talk about is the Temple Orange, and a little bit about Temple Terrace's history too, but also as it relates to the orange. So the city of Temple Terrace, as we all know, is named after the temple orange trees that once grew on the rolling terraces of this area. According to the Florida State Horticultural Society, the temple orange was introduced and marketed as the $10 a box orange and competed with the more costly oranges at the time. After some research I've done, Hale Groves in Vero Beach has them at $28 a box for 6 of them, and they are rather expensive, but you can order them online. Temple oranges also held the record in the 1920s for the world's largest orange grove spanning over 5,000 acres, and that was in this area. Parts of this grove later transformed into the University of South Florida and the city of Temple Terrace, and the original inhabitants here were gifted shares of the grove to help them pay off their property taxes and their property costs to purchase the property. The orange itself is actually a hybrid citrus fruit that is a cross between a tangerine and a sweet orange. It's known as a tanjor or a tangelo or a royal mandarin. And like its parent, the tangerine or the temple orange has a loose skin, which makes it easy to peel. And like its other parent, the sweet orange, the temple is juicy and tart, and temple oranges are considered in season from December until March. The temple oranges likely originated in Jamaica, but are considered an American variety because they are mostly grown in Florida, now so pretty much in South Florida only. Temple oranges are botanically classified as citrus reticulate. There are many subvarieties, including the Umatilla, the Murcott, and the King of Siam. They're still largely known as a Florida citrus fruit, but they can also be found growing in the Coachella Valley of California and in the Caribbean. The orange trees that they produce monoembryonic seeds, which are seeds that contain genes from both parents, and that makes them one of the most commonly used mother trees for citrus hybridization. But the interesting part, though, is where they actually came from, and there are two stories about their discovery that end up converging. Some sources state that the temple oranges, in fact, most sources state that the temple oranges were first discovered in Jamaica. One version of the discovery is that in 1896, a Florida fruit buyer known as Boyce, and I couldn't find a first name or anything else about him, found the variety in Jamaica and shipped budwood back to Winter Park, Florida, and began cultivating the oranges. Word spread around Florida of the new variety, and in 1915, it caught the attention of William Chase Temple, who was a well-known citrus grower who then introduced it to a friend at Buckeye Nurseries to help popularize the fruit. The owner of Buckeye Nurseries in Winter Park was Myron Gillette, and the name Gillette should be familiar to us. He was the father of D. Collins, or D.C. Gillette, who was the first mayor of Temple Terrace. So they are credited by some of having created the Temple orange. However, the story that comes from most sources is that a man named John Hakes and his wife Mary, while vacationing in Florida one winter, bought 17 acres of orange grove and grapefruit and tangerine groves in Winter Park. They knew next to nothing about farming and even less about horticulture, but their timing was very good as the citrus industry in Florida was booming at the time. Their small orchard turned a profit in the very first year, and they had so much work to do that they needed help, and eventually their son Lewis and his wife Ethel, who was a teacher in New York, moved to Winter Park. Neither of them knew anything about the citrus industry. But one day, Lewis was out in the groves and noticed an orange that was distinctly different from the others. He tried it and found that the pulp was tender and the flavor of the juice was richer and more exotic than most other oranges. He had discovered a new orange variety that would eventually be called the Temple. He took some samples of this new orange to a man named William Chase Temple, who had helped found the Florida Citrus Exchange in 1909 and was considered the authority on citrus at the time. Temple told Lewis to send a box of his oranges to the Buckeye Nursery in Tampa, and the owner was D.C. Gillette, who was an old friend of his. So Lewis mailed him some fruit, and Temple wrote him a letter of introduction, and Gillette was at the Hakes Grove within a matter of days. He ultimately signed a contract in which the Buckeye Nursery became the owner of all the budwood produced by the parent tree, and the Hakes family received a $2 royalty on all trees sold for 3 years after they were placed on the market. Gillette applied for a patent for the new orange, which meant that a name was needed, so they named the Temple in honor of William Chase Temple, who had given them so much help. Public interest in seeing the tree with the new Wonder Orange was so great that it resulted in the need to encircle the tree with a 10-foot wire mesh fence so no one would try to take the budwood. And in the papers that are being sent around, in addition to some pictures of crate labels from Florida, is also a picture of the original tree with the 10-foot fence around it. So in a few short years, the Temple became one of the most popular eating oranges in the nation. The Hakes family made hundreds of thousands of dollars from their discovery, but unfortunately they invested most of their money in Florida real estate, and there was a bust soon after. In the 1960s, when Lewis's wife Ethel was in her 80s, she told a story about Lewis putting a tent around his one tree that provided the parent budwood for the present-day Temple orange. A hard freeze was coming, and he wanted to protect the tree. So he put an oil heater into the tent, but was afraid that the tree would be damaged by the flame, so he set up a cot inside the tent and spent the cold night monitoring the heat and protecting his tree. And getting a little bit more now into Temple Terrace, the Palmers, as we've heard of them, primarily Bertha Palmer, had used the land near Temple Terrace as a hunting preserve, but then sold it in 1920 to 21 to William Hamner. Hamner turned around and sold the property to an association led by his brother, Bertz Hamner, and his partners, Vance Helm and D. Collins Gillette. This syndicate then formed two corporations. The first was Temple Terraces, Inc., and it was to develop approximately 4,000 to 5,000 acres north of Druid Hills Road for citrus production. Work on the groves began in February of 1921, and they apparently planted them with Temple oranges. The grove was designed to produce 1 million boxes of oranges annually, and did so after a few years of growth. Parts of this grove later transformed, as I said, into University of South Florida, but a portion of the citrus grove would be repurposed in 1924 into present-day neighborhood of Temple Crest. And I wanted to just conclude with a little bit about William Chase Temple, since ultimately his name is on our city. He was born in Stark, Florida, but grew up and was educated in the North. He was a coal, citrus, and lumber baron during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He served as director to more than 20 banks. He was part owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates from the baseball's National League. He is credited with launching the World Series in 1895, setting the rules, and donating the trophy of the era that was called the Temple Cup and now resides in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Temple was also the first lifetime member of AAA and was the first sole owner of a pro football team in 1898. He moved back to Florida when he was 35 years old, eventually served 3 terms as mayor of Winter Park, Florida, where he died at the age of 54 and is buried there. And that's all you could ever want to know about the Temple orange.
You got me at $28 for 6 oranges. That's where.
I was hoping to buy some and bring them, but they are very expensive.
Yeah.
And they have a very short growing season there. But they are a winter orange, and it says if you make your reservations now with the Hale Nurseries, you can reserve your orange for February.
Gourmet oranges. Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Schoen. Thank you. So, this is the best part of the highlight of the meeting here. Would Rachel Tidwell please come to the podium? So, another thing that we do here in Temple Terrace is we honor the Employee of the Month at our council meetings, and so this is a voting. This is a fairly new program that the city manager established. So the employees actually nominate and vote for the candidates. So it's more than just a supervisor saying, "Oh, this person's term." This is actually the People's Choice Award. So this is very good. So I do want to tell you a little bit about Rachel. So Leisure Services Executive Assistant Rachel Tidwell is nominated by 3 different employees this time to receive Employee of the Month. Rachel assists her department in many ways outside of her scope of duties. She frequently helps with youth programs in the fitness center and customer service areas, just to name a few. Every year she assists with the organization and execution of the city's 4th of July celebration and every other special event that the department organizes, including creating the props for the city's Winter Wonderland event. She has a can-do attitude and has great outside of the box ideas to help with the daily operations of our division. Rachel has proven to be a very important team member and is always looking for ways to improve employee morale, which is pretty high over there already, so thank you for that. Recently, she planned and executed a Parks and Recreation employee luncheon, which employees enjoyed very much. She's also a sounding board for many of her coworkers because she is a great listener and compassionate to her fellow employees' needs. She is the glue that keeps the department together. The Parks and Recs Division has many facets, and when everyone is running on different directions for a common goal, it is nice to have someone that can bring employees back together. She is truly a pleasure to work with, and she deserves to be recognized for all that she contributes to not just the Parks and Recreation Division, but all she does for the city as a whole. And I just have to tell you that we have a very distinguished workforce here in Temple Terrace. It's astonishing it's very difficult to pick an employee of the month from the outstanding employees we have. But particularly in that department, we have a really high concentration of rock stars in leisure services. And so this is particularly outstanding. So thank you. Would you like to say a few words?
I would, because I'm the employee of the month, I get more than 3 minutes, right?
Yes, you do.
Just kidding, I'm just kidding. No, but in all seriousness, I would like to say thank you. It really does mean a lot to me. To be selected as an employee of the month feels like a great honor, and especially when there's so many incredible men and women that work for this city. And so please understand and believe me when I say I am greatly appreciative of this, and I am blessed to work for an amazing city. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. Well done. Thank you.
All right, 3, 2, 1. One more time. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all you do. See, we should get some of those $28 oranges and give them to the employee of the month. Okay, next we have some board appointments. There's one vacancy on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Council. The city receives 2 applications from Jennifer Rimbitz and Eric Sievers. Ms. Rimbitz currently serves as an alternate on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Council. Mr. Sievers has been a bicycle commuter for more than 15 years. Are either of them here? Would you like to say a few words, sir? You don't have to, it's up to you, but you're welcome if you'd like.
Sure.
Yes, you do. Yes, sir. Just begin with your name, please.
My name is Eric Sievers. I'm a new resident of the city. I moved here about 4 months ago. So I have been a bike commuter for a long time and think that's an important part of, I guess, any community, and making sure that our citizens have an opportunity to do that safely. And I think it brings in a lot of potential visitors and increases the quality of life of a city. So that's what I'm applying for, and hope I can join.
Thank you, Mr. Sievers. And I would like to say, since while you're up, is welcome to Temple Terrace. And regardless of how this goes tonight, thank you very much for your willingness to serve to both candidates. And also, regardless of how this goes, it looks like there's going to be an alternate opening one way or the other here. So, I'm sorry?
I was going to ask that
Yeah.
because I thought one is already serving as an alternate, which means if we appointed them to the board or appointed whoever to the board, there'd be,
Have to be an alternate position, would have to be
Also filled.
advertised, though.
okay, that's
Yeah,
what I wondered.
Yeah, yeah. But there will be an alternate position open, well, or there'll be another vacancy here. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
And there are ballots, council members, if you would please cast your ballot. Unfortunately, there's only one vacancy right now.
All of the votes are for Jennifer Rimbus.
Okay. So is there a motion to appoint Jennifer Remitz, please, as a regular member of the BPAC.
Move to approve to appoint Jennifer Rembitz to the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Second.
Motion and a second by Councilmember Fernandez. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no nays. Mr. Severs, again, thank you. The clerk should probably be advertising for the alternate position, and we would very much welcome your application for that. So, and again, welcome to Temple Terrace. There's another appointment here for the Board of Adjustment. There are 2 regular appointments. There are 3 regular member vacancies on the board. Unfortunately, we only have 2 applications. One is from Michael Donahue and the other is from Karen Mahowski. Is there a motion to accept the applications?
Move to approve Michael Donahue and Carol Mikowski to the 2 of the open slots of the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion of the motion. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No nays. Mr. Donahue, Ms. Mahowski, if you're watching, congratulations. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes of our January 7th meeting? And if so, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion or corrections to the minutes? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No nays. Minutes are adopted. Next are persons wishing to be heard on items not listed on the agenda or items on the consent agenda. There are forms in the back of the room for any members of the public who wish to address the council at this time. There is a 3-minute time limit imposed on all speakers, and we do ask that you come to the podium and state your name and city of residence first. I currently have no requests to speak. Okay, very well. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda is adopted. Thank you. Next is a resolution approving the roadway transfer agreement of Morris Bridge Road with the Florida Department of Transportation. Our city engineer, Brian McCarthy, is here to explain. Good evening, Mr. McCarthy.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Brian McCarthy, City Engineer, and I'm here this evening seeking approval for the Morris Bridge Road transfer agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation. Essentially, the city isn't purchasing the right-of-way, but is accepting the maintenance responsibility of this roadway. Shown the figure on the screen, highlighted in red, is Morris Bridge Road, starting on the bottom end. It's basically slightly north of Fowler Avenue. It basically will start at the IHOP or Ramada Inn driveway, and as you're moving north, go all the way up to Fletcher Avenue. There is one bridge in this section of roadway that FDOT has agreed to continue to maintain. That's the bridge over Cowhouse Creek. It's a little difficult to see on this figure, but if you follow the Hillsborough River from Fowler Avenue, kind of going north, there's this creek that kind of moves towards I-75, and there's a small section that the Morris Bridge Road travels over. Essentially, once I-75 was constructed, Morris Bridge Road likely no longer provided that regional purpose for the area, and thus FDOT is starting to divest from the frontage roads that you see throughout the county, and they're being transferred to cities and county jurisdictions. As part of this transfer, FDOT has agreed to update the roadway. They essentially resurfaced the road, made some safety improvements, as well as added a new widened path along the west side of the roadway. Our FDOT partners are here today. They don't have a statement prepared, but are here for any technical questions. With that said, staff recommends City Council approve the Morris Bridge Road transfer agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? You're good. Council members, are there questions? Councilmember Fernandez.
I guess my question is for staff. So if this, the way I'm reading this is that it becomes basically a city road in order to maintain it, but does that mean that the city can also make changes to the road? Like, could we add sidewalks alongside of it, or lighting, or expand the road?
Yes. So essentially, it becomes a city local road.
Okay, so then the city would basically have complete control over this road with any changes, any maintenance, we would oversee all of it, crosswalks, anything that, if the city said, we want to put a golf cart path, the city can do all of that. But DOT is going to maintain the, if not maybe the ownership, but the maintenance aspects of the bridge? Or will we be responsible for that also?
So DOT will be responsible for the bridge. Any type of improvements that we want to make to the bridge would likely have to go through FDOT review as well.
Okay, but every other aspect of the road would now fall under city control, the city paving schedule, the city striping schedule, all of that?
Yes.
Okay. And so now my question is about money. And that would be adding this part of the road to our maintenance and striping schedule. How have we looked at the impact of that financially?
Luckily, FDOT has restriped and repaved the road, so hopefully within the next 20 or 30 years, we don't have to come back, at least for the resurfacing piece of it. We might have to restripe, maybe in the next 10 or 15 years, depending upon conditions.
Okay, and then any cost to maintain would come out of the same streets improvement funds that we currently have from gas taxes and
Yes.
those sources? Okay.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Councilmember Chambers.
Thank you. The right-of-way or the grass areas next to the road or between the sidewalk and the road, who maintains that now?
FDOT does,
They cut the grass. Would we take that over?
and then we will be taking it over, yes.
All right, so that's going to require more work from our parks crew or streets or
From our
whoever?
Public Works Department.
Okay, and that would be included in their budget? Or can they absorb that cost? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I could have asked that earlier, but I apologize.
To the best of my knowledge, yes, we'll be able to absorb that additional cost.
Okay, let me look somewhere else.
We're all looking alike. Sorry, excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Yes, our understanding is that this segment of road, in terms of the limited landscaping that's along the segment, is something that we can absorb.
Okay, good. The reason being, I know the residents along Primrose and the other streets there, they've complained about the sidewalk and the grass cutting around the sidewalk and all that, so that's going to be us. We'll edge around the sidewalks and all that. That's perfect. I mean, I like that better. Okay. Thank you.
So, Mr. McCarthy, I'm trying to remember exactly what it looks like. I was up there not long ago, but that new path that you talked about that parallels Morris Bridge goes the whole way, doesn't it, most of it?
does.
And it's a 12-foot multi-use path,
I believe it goes as wide as 10 feet.
10 feet. Okay, so the trail's already, mostly constructed up there. Okay, very good. Would you like to add anything from DOT, or? Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve the resolution approving the roadway transfer agreement of Morris Bridge Road with the Florida Department of Transportation.
Second.
Good discussion of the motion. I have a couple quick comments. One is, yes, there'll be added maintenance cost over the period of years. But this is an area of the city, if you recall, that we've identified for potential strategic annexation. And this supports that endeavor by now making us contiguous with things that we weren't contiguous with before. So this has some strategic benefit to our priorities. The second thing I think is important to note is I'd just like to give our previous city manager, Stevenson, some credit in this, because I believe this idea first came up when he was still with us. And I remember that he was very concerned to protect the city's interests in making sure that DOT rehabilitated the road before we took it over. The path, I think, was part of that discussion, negotiation. The bridge, I know, was a concern of his, that we're not in the bridge business, and nor do we want to be. And so a lot of this groundwork for this deal to be here tonight was actually done by Mr. Stevenson, and I think he did a good job with it, so. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No nays. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, DOT. The other Brian. Next is a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 2025 budget, and our Finance Director, Jim Ingram, is here to explain.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. At the conclusion of fiscal year 2024, there were several purchase orders for items and projects that were not completed by September 30th, 2024. Because the expenditures did not take place in fiscal year 2024, there is fund balance to continue these necessary commitments into fiscal year 2025. The items and projects on these purchase orders were approved and appropriated in fiscal year 2024. And I might add here, it's not in here, but there are a few items that were not encumbered through a purchase order, but they were approved in the budget. A few of those and they are noted in the details. We had to carry those over as well to complete. Exhibit 1 details the purchase order numbers, vendors, GL account item or project description, amount balance for the budget adjustment, and the appropriated fund balance accounts to adjust in order to provide funds and balance the budget. The aggregate totals for each affected fund are as follows. General Fund, $248,502. General Fund, specifically for the EOC state grant, $458,018. Street Improvement Fund, $454,256. Street Improvement Fund that is dedicated ARPA dollars, $1,051,731. Out of the Community Investment Tax Fund, we have $1,588,557. Tax Increment Fund, $323,067. The Water and Sewer Utility Fund, dedicated to ARPA, $7,038,707, and that's for our new building. Water and Sewer Utility Fund, $464,421. Water and Sewer Renewal and Replacement Fund is $1,940,327. Water Improvement Fund, $951,362. Sewer Improvement Fund, $880,000. Sanitation Fund, $812,732. Like I said, Exhibit 1 has the details of all the projects for each fund and the amounts. One new thing that I added for this year was to show you the estimated fund balance of each of these funds, to show that, yes, we have the money, the funds, we didn't run over, and we're asking to carry over funds that aren't available. So we are showing that estimated fund balance for each of these funds and the total, as I just read off, that are coming from those funds. So I will be glad to ask you or answer any questions you might have. And we have directors here too that if you have some detailed questions about any of these projects or items, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer those questions as well.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Are there members of the public who wish to comment? If not, council member questions.
I do.
Councilmember Fernandez.
So just to help clarify for the public who might not be governmental accountants, these funds that we are talking about in this budget adjustment were all in the 2024 fiscal year-end budget. So they were theoretically anticipated to be spent in 2024. However, the projects either weren't completed or some aspect of them was delayed. So those funds were never actually dispersed. So
That's correct.
that's just what I want people, so that, people listening, they can understand that these, basically now, the budget was not set to include these projects because theoretically, we thought these projects would be completed in fiscal 2024. So now, we're basically making this adjustment because they were not either started or completed in 2024 to put them in 2025 so that they can be spent in 2025.
That's correct. In fact, we had several, especially out of the community investment tax, police vehicles that were delayed out of circumstances beyond our control. And we've already received several of them after October 1, so they have to be spent out of this year's budget. That's why we've actually got them. And as far as the projects, there are projects that are already ongoing. They're continuing, so we need to carry the balances over.
So then I have another question about ARPA, the ARPA projects. I know we have a deadline, and I know that we're watching this very closely, but some of the projects are very engaging, they're large projects. So are we still, everything is on track to meet the deadline so that we don't have any issue with funding?
Yes, City Manager.
Yes, we encumbered the funds by the deadline of December 31st of 2024 was the deadline for encumbering those ARPA dollars. We're making progress. In fact, I believe Mr. Warrenfeld's at the end during my portion of the agenda will be coming up to talk about give the council and the public an update on where we are with those projects among other public works initiatives.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Good. Thank you. Other questions, council members? So one quick one. Do you think that this takes care of all the carryover 2024, or will we be doing this again, or do you know?
I don't anticipate doing it again. I mean, that's not typical. We try to get them all done by January, mid-January. We know we've gone through to the directors, say, hey, look at your budgets. Are we missing anything? And so I don't anticipate that. Okay. We might have budget amendments for some other things that come up during the year, but I don't anticipate any more carryovers.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ingham. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the resolution approving the amendments to the fiscal year 2025 budget.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No nays. Resolution is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Ingham.
Thank you.
Next item is the first public hearing and first reading of an ordinance creating Article 5, trespassing, under Chapter 16 of the Code of Ordinances. I will open the public hearing and ask Deputy City Attorney Ernie Mueller to explain.
Good morning, City Council, or good evening, City Council and Mayor. I'm here to present an ordinance for first reading that creates Article 5 under Chapter 16 called trespass, and then underneath that will be then this ordinance, Section 16-101, called trespass on public property. As I'm sure the City Council is aware, Chapter 810 of the Florida statute authorizes our law enforcement officers to trespass persons from property, be it private or public. So if the owners of private property located in the city does not want to have a person or persons to be on that property, for whatever reason, they can ask the city's police department to issue a trespass warning to whoever is not wanted on that property. The trespass warning is for 1 year, and if the person or persons violate that trespass warning, they can be arrested for a trespass. Pretty straightforward. Now, there may be times that someone on city or public property needs to be issued a trespass warning because they violated a state law or a city ordinance or city rules or regs, or they've been asked to leave by city staff because they've engaged in conduct or behavior that is disruptive or is posing some sort of threat to the safety of other people, to city staff, or to the property itself. However, trespassing someone from public property is not as straightforward as private property. Some property of ours may be a traditional public forum or a designated public forum, limited public forum. Bottom line, those types of forums may implicate some sort of constitutional right. So if someone receives such a trespass warning, we need to be able to create an appeal process of that trespass warning. So what is this ordinance accomplishing? First, it's reaffirming the city's right to issue a trespass warning to someone on public or city property for a period of 1 year. The trespass warning is for the specific property that the conduct or behavior occurred, and if the person or persons violate that trespass warning, they may be arrested. Second, the ordinance establishes an appeal process to the city manager and will provide the time frame in which the appeal must be filed, where to file the appeal, to schedule the scheduling of a hearing, the time to render a decision, the rules governing the hearing, and the manner in which we can notify that person. Sometimes it may be a homeless person or someone we have to establish a way to get orders and notices to that person. A document setting forth that appeal process will be provided to the person at the time the trespass warning is issued. A couple more things that this ordinance will do is establish that during the pendency of a trespass warning, the city manager may authorize an individual who has received a warning to enter the trespass property to exercise First Amendment rights or to conduct necessary city business if there are no reasonable alternative methods to do so. And finally, if a person violates the trespass warning and is arrested during the pendency of an appeal, if they have appealed, in other words, but they violated that trespass warning and they get arrested, that appeal will be canceled because this entire matter will then be handled by the courts. That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Are other members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Very good. Council member questions. Councilmember Chambers.
Yes. Mr. Mueller, thank you. A question, you made a statement, I think I heard it correctly, that police could it would be trespass from one property location?
Right. It would be trespassed from wherever that conduct or
Okay, so if somebody did something in one of the parks, could they only be trespassed from that park? Example, if they're in River Hills Park, they're trespassed so they could walk 10 feet into Scout Park? Or could they be trespassed from all parks or both rec centers? You see where I'm going with it?
yes. As it's written now, it would be just that specific park.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Because I thought we used to be able to trespass from all parks, but maybe I was wrong and did it wrong all those years.
Well, not necessarily. I'm just, this ordinance that we are presenting is only going to be, the way it's written now, is they would only be trespassed from that particular property.
Okay?
That's a good question. And so should we, I'm thinking of boat ramps. For instance, somebody's doing something totally egregious or reckless or whatever the case may be at one of the boat ramps. Well, we have another boat ramp 3 miles away. They could just simply drive to the other boat ramp.
Yeah.
Is that, yes, Chief, please. If this is the way we want it, so be it.
Good evening, Ken Albano, your police chief. The reason this was drafted, and he's put a lot of work into it, it more or less mirrors what we do with private property, and also allows for an indiscretion or a mistake in one location not to have someone banned from all the parks necessarily. Certainly, they could have another incident at another park or the other boat ramp. It just allows for it to, as closely as possible, mirror what we're doing already. The only new thing that is new to any of this really is the appeals process. I mean, we have continued, based on what you just mentioned, trespass previous to this, trespass people from city properties when necessary. And I've worked with Carl in some occasions to make sure the officers were there and supporting our leisure services people as well. So while you can have an indiscretion that leads to a trespass from the library, for instance, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're banned from the rec center and so forth and so on. And therefore, really makes the manager's job easier when he's hearing these appeals. You're not banning someone from every city property all at once. That would be inconsistent with what we do with the private property.
Thank you.
Okay, you good? Councilmember Fernandez.
He's-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead. I'll follow.
Okay, well, so I have some questions about what kind of behavior would generate a trespass, because it seems to me like the behavior that, at least some of the examples, would already be covered under the criminal code, so that somebody would be arrested. Is this then, if they've been arrested, I'm uncomfortable with the trespass on public property.
That's state law already allows that.
No, I mean, I'm
Speak
just,
directly to that, Councilmember Fernandez. We already trespass on public property. Again, I tried to make it clear for everybody and our citizens, we're doing that. What this establishes is the appeal. We are actually adding provisions to help to ensure the First Amendment rights of our citizens and our guests. So it's already in statute. Our officers, as is the case in other municipalities throughout the state, are already doing this. What this does is it corrects an issue that we've fortunately, as far as I'm aware of, not had a lot of desire, but the appeals process was established by other municipalities in order to protect those First Amendment rights, and that's all we're really doing. Also, when it comes to the public venues, it's not like our staff has or will, because we're adding this appeals process, be any more rigid in applying trespass warnings. When we are called, it's typically because staff, wherever they are, whether it's the library or wherever else, have exhausted their abilities to try to negotiate or rectify whatever the problem happens to be. When they call us, we then come, we will speak to the staff, and we will try to do the same thing. The last thing that Carl wants to have to do is have staff, or I want to do is have my officers have to trespass someone from a public place. But if that effort to negotiate by staff leads to our arrival and we are unable to resolve the matter, then a trespass warning has been and will continue to be issued, because it is state law. We are allowed to do that, and we will continue to do that, because sometimes that's your last resort. What this is meant to do is establish that appeals process and allow the city manager, as the person to be hearing them, to take into consideration things that may be presented to him, and make adjustments to the trespass warning that has been issued as far as time.
okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, if staff is calling you, or you're being called to a park because of the behavior of a person there, isn't that normally that they're doing something that's already in violation of? So I guess I'm asking, wouldn't they already be arrested?
No, not always, no. Sometimes yes, but not always. For instance, 4 arrests were made at the library last year. 16 trespass warnings were issued. Only 4 arrests.
So in this case, we would be then offering somebody who has been issued a trespass warning to appeal that. How long does a trespass warning normally last? Like, how long would somebody be?
Trespass warnings, just like for the public, for the private properties, will be a year for our public properties. And again, we'll use the same trespass warning. The only difference in that is we will provide the appeals process. So they will be aware of that, and they will appeal to the city manager, and then they'll follow those rules that allow the city manager to convey information back and forth between the appellate and the city manager to ensure that they understand what the process is and they can come and share that with the city manager. So that's the big thing. That's the overarching, that's the reason for this. It gives more information that's readily available to our citizens so they can understand the process, but the process is what it is and has been established by state law for many years, my entire career and further back, I'm sure. This is really a help for our citizens in giving them, if they find themselves at odds for some reason, who knows, and it can't be resolved otherwise, and we get involved and we do issue a trespass warning, it gives them the knowledge and the ability to appeal to the city manager.
Okay.
Councilmember Schisler.
Yes, couple questions. This has nothing, this won't apply to any private trespass, correct?
We already do that, and it will
No, I mean,
continue to be.
the appellate, the appeals process.
No, there is no appeal. They go to court.
Okay, so, all right. So how long does it take? We have a problem with the rec center, okay? Will your officers issue the trespass warning on spot?
Absolutely. Well,
Okay.
again, if warranted, again,
I understand. No, all things
Charles
being
people
equal.
aren't looking for reasons to trespass somebody from any of his properties. We will get called, I would anticipate, it will continue to be what it has been. We're only going to get called when they have not been able to resolve something. And then our first go isn't, yeah, thank you, and here's your trespass warning. We're going to talk to the staff person. We're going to figure out what's going on. We're going to make sure that it may be that it's so far beyond or it's such an egregious thing that a trespass warning is warranted when we get there, but we're still going to talk to the person. In most cases, our hope would be that we can mitigate whatever the issue is to the satisfaction of the staff, and we will be able to not have to issue a trespass warning. Maybe they just leave voluntarily for the day, and maybe that's all that staff wants them to do. Then we're going to do that. We don't want to issue people trespass warnings from our public places unless we have to, and it's a last resort.
And I understand, and I'm just trying to clarify somebody does something stupid, and ultimately everybody's trying to mitigate it, and you finally have to issue, it gets issued at that point in time.
At that point,
At point in time. You don't have to go back and then come back and
No,
do
sir.
this. Okay.
The staff will be given a copy, the person being trespassed gets a copy, we keep a copy.
Okay, so then the final question is, the genesis of this action, or of what we're trying to do here, is for us only, we're not being forced by any statute, any state rules or anything, any state
It
laws?
is a common practice that we haven't had in our code, and so it is important. We've worked on it for a while. It's something, establishing the appeals process provides protection for the city from someone trying to make allegations of us violating their First Amendment rights in the process.
No, I think it's good. I think it's good, a good way to approach it. Okay, thank you. I'm good.
I have a couple of quick questions. I'm not sure, Chief, I'm not sure whether they're yours or, I'm thinking they're Carl's, but that's up to the city manager. So, two quick ones. One is, in the actual language in the proposed ordinance says trespass warnings may be issued for a period of 1 year. Well, the use of the term may kind of suggests that there's a possibility that they may also be issued for a lesser period of time, if so decided. Is that, so yeah, speak to that, please.
As part of the appeals process, it's a city manager, after he reviews all of the additional information that may be shared with them that necessarily wasn't available to the officers. If there is a decision made by the city manager, certainly at a point prior to the year, he could rescind it, make the proper notifications to staff. I'm sure he'd bring Carl in and me in and we'd talk. And then whatever the date was, as long as he made sure that the staff person at that facility and police was aware of that, then there would be no standing trespass warning in the system, so there would not be a danger of someone showing up and being arrested for
Okay,
trespassing.
so it could be lifted it could be early termination.
As part of the appeals process, yes.
Okay, and so my second part of that question is, could it be also at that hearing less than a year based on your discussion? It could be, you could say, okay, I'm going to uphold this, but only for 90 days or 6 months, or is that
Yes,
permissible? That's what's implied by the use of the term may.
So Just to clarify one thing, though, when the officer issues it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, the officer issues it, it is a 1-year trespass warning.
Unless you modify it.
Exactly. If the appellant if the person goes beyond, about their business and then they appeal it later, there's a certain window of time for them to appeal based on this ordinance. If they appeal within that window of time, assuming council approves this, then yes, then they provide me documentation or testimony at the hearing. If I feel compelled, based on that evidence provided, that it makes sense in this case to reduce
Okay,
that 1-year trespass warning, I could do that.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to verify that. It's not a year or nothing. It's okay, up to a year. The last question I have, and this is what I'm thinking might be for Mr. Langfield or whoever, is and correct me if I don't understand your current procedures correctly, but I know at least in some cases, you have given people a short period of time, like a cooling off thing, like go home for 2 weeks, don't come back to for 2 weeks. And then let's see how this works. And then if you come back in 2 weeks and things are better, everybody's happy. But if you come back in 2 weeks and things aren't better, we ramp up to calling and getting a trespass warning for a year. How will this impact you? Will you still do those informal, I'm sorry, Chief says he's got this, so.
I can speak to it.
So you'll still do
He can still do procedurally whatever he does until he
That won't change.
engages police. There is no trespass warning. Everything he does prior, because it's a negotiation between Carl and a member of the,
all that will still occur?
absolutely.
Okay, so I didn't know if everybody understood that.
This changes none of that.
Okay,
Again, the
this
biggest
just
thing,
changes if we're gonna trigger the state statute for trespassing.
and establishes more than anything,
Yeah.
the appeals process.
So the only change that we're doing is added the appeals process?
Yes, sir.
Nothing else has changed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions, council members? I think that's the takeaway, is nothing's changed except we've added an appeals process.
That's correct.
Mr. Mueller?
I think Mr. Chambers had a good question that I really hadn't considered, which is the idea that if we trespass them off of one park,
We could.
don't necessarily want them waltzing to the park next door and then, so, if you pass this for first reading, I will look at language, to try and address that, hoping that I can find some way of drafting something that would maybe apply to all parks in that situation. I can't think of anything else that might have that same type of, scenario other than the parks. I mean, I think the library and the rec center are two distinct buildings, but I think that that's a very valid question I hadn't considered.
I know we're still in questions, but I see the chief disagreeing with that.
I would respectfully like to have an opportunity to discuss with council before that was conveyed, because it creates a problem for us with respect to state statute. We don't enforce state statute that way. You're here doing one thing, and it's a unique situation, I understand, but at the same time, if you had a small indiscretion here and you ended up getting trespassed, do we really want to disallow any use of any city park because they had one indiscretion at one point?
Just a request, since this is first reading, consider it, get together.
We may not be able to draft, get the language necessary to address.
And with Mr. Langfeld, I know he has some things, and I won't get into past employment with me, so.
Very good. Council, we all set? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing if you're ready, and I'll ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance. I will close the hearing and ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance. See, I told you I was going to do that.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, creating Article 5 trespassing under Chapter 16 of the City of Temple Terrace Code of Ordinances, creating Section 16-101, trespass on public property, authorization to issue trespass warning, appeal process, providing for severability, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there a motion?
Move to approve on first public hearing and first reading of the ordinance creating Article 5 trespassing under Chapter 16 of the Code of Ordinances.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion of the ordinance?
Yes, I do.
Councilmember Schisler.
The ordinance as it is just for the appeals process, correct? So then the issue that Councilman Chambers has brought up, and you guys want to review, really has no bearing on this. We're all talking appeal. We're not talking about the actual nature of the trespass itself. Is that correct? If you change, anything else that you do would change the trespass ordinance, not just this section of it. Or am I reading too much into it?
Under 16-101B of the proposed ordinance, it says the trespass warning will pertain to the specific property where the violation occurred and bans the recipient from entering onto that property. I think that would be the area that we would, if we can find language or a process that would address that, we would be changing that, which is outside of the appeal process. If I understood your question.
Okay. I just don't want to be trying to create something that we're not trying to do that here necessarily, but if you feel that falls under the 16-101, then see what you guys come back with.
Yeah, if we find language or find a way to be able to change that, yeah, it would fall outside the actual appeal process, but it would be more pertaining to the reaffirming the law enforcement's ability to trespass someone off of public property and what public property we're talking about.
Does that fall outside the purview of the way the ordinance is advertised is my concern. Is it a bait and switch type thing?
No, I do not believe so. I
Okay.
don't think that, I think it would not change the title.
Okay,
And depending on how the language goes, if we can even find language, we can talk about whether or not that's a substantive change that would require a second first reading.
okay, my motion stands.
Right, comment, and it's been many years, the city has trespassed people from all the parks for an infraction at one of the parks. That has happened, so my only concern, not concern, but to make sure that this ordinance he keeps referring to as it's written here, is that in our current ordinance and we're just adding the appeals process, or when did that change? That's my only concern. If we're currently just doing it from one piece of property, one park or such. That's all I'm asking is that we look at it. That we look at it, that's all.
Yeah, I think we have a good motion on the table, and I think we're kind of overthinking things a little bit.
That's what I'm afraid of.
What we're talking about is how the chief and our police officer interpret and apply Section 810 of Florida statutes, and I don't think that's our purview. What we're doing here is establishing an appeals process. It's a valid question for the chief to consider and for the city attorney to get together and how they enforce this. But what they're enforcing, whether it's a trespass notification or whether it's an arrest, what they're enforcing is Chapter 810 of Florida statutes, not any city ordinance. And so we don't get to tell the chief how to enforce that and so that's up to the chief and the city attorney to figure out whether, and I'm racking my brain trying to remember, because when I was a deputy, we used to trespass people from county parks all the time. And I can't remember whether they were trespassed from all county parks or just that one. But regardless of my ancient experiences, whatever the chief and the city attorney,
I just want to.
however they apply Chapter 810 is.
Well, that was my point. I didn't want to be, trying to rewrite the whole thing now to include all the parts. I just want to
I think it's a valid point. I just think we're straying out of the
Agreed.
ordinance, the borders of the ordinance a bit.
Agreed.
Comfortable?
No, I was comfortable before, yeah.
So, but what we are specifically doing here through this action is adding the appeals process that gives, not necessarily a citizen of Temple Terrace, but anybody in Temple Terrace, the ability to appeal an action that has been taken by officers, we're not doing anything to change the action that the police may or may not take.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
First reading.
All those in favor of first reading?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No nays? The ordinance is approved on first reading and will appear for a second reading and public hearing on Tuesday, February the 4th, 2025. Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Thank you, Chief. Didn't mean to cut you off. I was just trying to. Good, thank you. Next item is a second public hearing and second reading of ordinance 1577, modifying a plan development zoning classification for addresses 11801 North 56th Street and 11714 North 58th Street. I'll open the public hearing and ask anyone who plans to speak on this matter to stand for the oath administered by the city clerk.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Welcome back, gentlemen. City Attorney, would you please poll for ex parte communication?
Yes. If each member of council would state now for the record whether you have had any ex parte communications concerning this matter that would involve whether they were written or oral. Please state with whom you had that communication, when it took place, and the sum and substance of that communication if you had one. And I will start with, and also if it was in writing, it needs, a copy of that will need to be provided to the clerk as soon as possible. Councilmember Fernandez.
I did have a conversation with the city manager about just generally, not this project specifically, but generally speaking, some of the projects that have come before council that have certain project parameters were approved, but then the project strayed from those parameters and then came back for city approval. So my conversation was with the city manager was about how can we basically catch those projects before they deviate from the parameters.
And did you specifically address this particular case?
I mean, I did reference this as one of the projects that the parameters were approved in one direction and we're approving new parameters after building has commenced, but.
And when did that take place?
That was Friday. I think it was Friday.
Thursday or Friday?
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Chambers?
I've had none.
Mayor Ross?
I've had none.
Councilmember Schisler?
I've had none.
Thank you.
Our city planner, Miranda Anaya, is here to explain. Good evening, Miss Anaya.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. This is the second reading and second public hearing of RZP 2402 to modify a plan development. This is an aerial view of the subject property and the surrounding area. The applicant is requesting to amend a plan development for two buildings, one consisting of restaurant and the other consisting of restaurant, office, and retail. The proposed acreage for the property is approximately 3.54 acres. The property has one unoccupied building previously used as restaurant. This is the current PD that was approved under in 2023 under RZP 2202. Building 1 was approved for 10,800 square feet for restaurant and retail, and Building 2 for a 2-story restaurant. Here's the proposed master plan as revised by the applicant to include the balcony seating as discussed in the first reading. Building 1 will be increased to 2 stories consisting of approximately 21,000 square feet, consisting of restaurant, and Building 2 will be increased to 23,300 square feet for restaurant, retail, and office. The applicant is requesting 2 deviations. The first is for bicycle parking, spaces from 24 spaces to 20, and the second deviation is a reduction in vehicle parking from 232 spaces to 195 spaces. Staff has no objections to the request for the reasons mentioned at the first hearing, and they're also mentioned in the staff report. The Planning Commission and DRC recommends approval of the PD amendment. The applicant also modified the PD to include renderings and elevations. Here are the renderings submitted by the applicant for Building 1. And these are the renderings for Building 2. The elevations specifically can be found in the backup material. This concludes my presentation. As discussed at the first hearing, there are proposed conditions. There are 7 conditions. If you recall, condition 6 was removed entirely to include the outdoor seating now, and condition 5 was amended to include the bicycle parking deviation.
Thank you, Ms. Anaya. Mr. Pressman, would you like to? Good evening, sir. Welcome back.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and council members, Todd Pressman, 200 2nd Avenue South, number 451 in St. Petersburg. We are very happy to be here this evening, Hashem and I. Hashem has made a considerable investment in the property, and it is, even at this point, a tremendous improvement to what was at the site, which had become quite an eyesore in the city. And he's obviously fully prepared to finish the project and move forward. We're very glad to have all the prior approvals of this body, and as your planner indicated, the approvals of the bodies and boards before you. So with that, we appreciate your consideration and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, council members, are there questions for staff or the applicant?
I have a question for staff.
Councilmember Fernandez, I think it's for the city planner.
So for the project, if we approve, well, what's in front of us tonight on second reading, how does the project progress from there?
Yeah, the next step will be for the applicant to submit a final site plan. So you will see this project again. The final site plan includes all the pages in that project. So it'll be the full scope.
Okay, so, but then, that, can you make changes if if they get through the building process and they say, as they're preparing for the final site plan that would come in front of us, that, can they make changes from what we've approved tonight?
So the master plan is the overall plan. The final site plan should mimic the master plan. So you'll see the details of that master plan in the final site plan. Once they're done with final site plan, they can move to building permits, and the final site plan should match the building permits.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I will close the public hearing and ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, modifying a planned development for 3.54 plus-minus acres of property consisting of 4 lots lying north of East Fowler Avenue and east of North 56th Street, addressed as 11714 North 58th Street and 11801 North 56th Street, for RZP 24-02, providing for amendment of the official atlas map of the city, providing for severability, providing for correction of typographical errors, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there a motion?
Yes, I approve, motion to approve on second reading of ordinance 1577, modifying a planned development zoning classification for address 11801 North 56th Street and 11714 North 58th Street with the conditions as listed.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion is second by Councilmember Fernandez. Discussion of the motion.
I just have a comment.
Councilmember Schuster.
Disappointed with the changes that were instituted without council's blessing. But that being said, who's going to ride their bike in that neighborhood?
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of bike riders up there.
I don't know. Anyway, I'm in favor of it, but 25 bike or 20 or 24 bike stalls there, it's going to be, and then cut back on vehicle. Would you ride your bike? I don't think I'd ride my bike up there, but that's a separate issue.
I ride my bike all over.
Yeah, not on Fowler.
And I think the building's looking pretty good, actually. I think it's got, I like the renderings. I think it's going to look.
It'll look good. Oh, it's going to look good.
Okay, other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? No nays. The ordinance passes. Thank you again. Next item is the second public hearing and second reading of ordinance 1578, approving a land development code amendment regarding the regulation of fences, updating definitions and non-conforming fences. I will open the public hearing and then advise the public that this matter will be continued until our meeting on February the 4th, 2025. We have done that in the abundance of caution to prepare a business impact study that seems to be required by the new state statute, although that was a little ambiguous at first for this type of action. In the abundance of caution, we're going to go ahead and complete that to make sure everything is done up according to statute. So this matter will be continued. Well,
We need a motion.
yeah, we do. So I do need a motion, if that's the council's desire, to continue this matter till February 4th city council meeting.
Move to continue the, second reading, second public hearing reading on ordinance 1578 to the February 4th meeting.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, this hearing will occur on February the 4th, 2025. Is there any carryover council business from previous meetings? New business and board reports. The first item under this section of the meeting is that the mayor has responsibility for annually appointing the city council members to serve as representatives of the city on various Hillsborough County boards and state committees. There have been some changes this year. I try to assign everybody where they want to be, but election years are always a little bit different because we have a new person, and there's typically some of these assignments require a little more experience than others. And so there are some changes this year. And I'll just read into the record so everybody who's watching can see what I have in front of me. So my committee assignments as the mayor are to the Hillsborough County Transportation Planning Organization, or the TPO, where I'm chair, so I'm kind of important that I'm there. The Tampa Hillsborough Economic Development Corporation, the Florida League of Cities, the Florida League of Mayors, the Tourism Development Council, the Police Pension Board ex officio, the Fire Pension Board ex officio, Suncoast League of Cities, Visit Tampa Bay Advisory Council, Historic Preservation Board. Councilmember Kravitz are going to be our representative on the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Hillsborough River Interlocal Planning Board, and the River Watch Task Force. Councilmember Chambers will be our liaison to the Board of Adjustment, the Library Board, the Code Enforcement Board, the Centennial Celebration Committee, the School Support Committee, the Affordable Housing Board alternate. Councilmember Fernandez will serve on the Cultural Assets Commission, the Advisory Board of the Arts Council Division of Hillsborough County, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, the Suncoast League of Cities alternate. And Councilmember Schisler, Vice Mayor Schisler, will serve as my alternate on the Hillsborough Transportation Planning Organization. He will serve on the HART Board, Hillsborough County Regional Transit. He will serve on the Temple Terrace Audit Committee, the Temple Terrace Golf and Country Club Strategic Action Committee, the Police Pension Board ex officio, and the Fire Pension Board ex officio. So is there a motion, council, to approve these appointments?
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? Appeals? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No nays.
Another comment.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you for the appointment to Hart, as I was just elected secretary of the board in the last meeting, appointed to the Finance and Audit, Strategic Planning, Safety Operations, Tampa Streetcar Commission, and I get this screwed up there, the Transportation Disadvantaged Advisory Board. So
Yes. Well, and
the continuity,
besides that, I think you're an all-around great guy, and I don't want to incur your wrath. I also don't want to incur the wrath of the other 4 council members if I put somebody else on the HART board. So, okay. We already took a vote. Passed. Okay, thank you. Other new business or board reports? I do want to mention, real quick, it was on the consent agenda, and I didn't want to pull it for this, but on the consent agenda tonight, we spent $500,000 for the purchase of new police radios. That's funded through the community investment tax, which was just voted on in November by the public and narrowly passed for renewal for 15 years. This is a prime example of the kinds of things that I was talking about in the public encouraging people, I mean, I hate to ask people to vote for a renewal of a tax, that just doesn't feel right. But this is $500,000 that we would have had to come up with from property owners, that we don't have to come up with from property owners. And so 20% of that $500,000 is funded by people who are visiting our community, who also use police and fire radios, by the way. So this is just an example of that. And so also I think most of you heard in my invocation today, our longtime city lobbyist, Louis Best, passed away last night. I don't know how many of you, if any of you, knew Louis. He's a real institution in Florida politics, and he will be sorely missed. He's done a tremendous job for the city. It's how we got the EOC funding, but he's also helped us advocate for live local amendments and things. When you send us to Tallahassee, we use Louis and Travis really help us up there. So please keep him in your prayers. Travis Mitchell, his associate, is still in business, but he's going through a rough time. He's been with Louis a long time, so please keep them all in your prayers. And that's all I have. Anything else under this section? Okay, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just have 3 items to review with you. The first is, in light of the recent ordinance amendment discussion about the fences, it brought to my attention that we haven't had a workshop with the council on several of the changes since basically a year ago. We have a new member of council as well, so I think it might be a good time to revisit some of those longstanding issues, and there may be other land development issues the council may want us to consider or have us move in a different direction. So what I'd like to do is, with the council's blessing, is suggest a workshop for the last week of February. So if that's okay with the council, I can have Jeannie work with you on selecting a date that makes sense for everybody, unless you want to do it here this evening. Typically, we would do this in the morning, say from 9 to 12, for example. So that's our suggestion. We think it would make the process work a lot better if we could do it that way.
Well, I will tell you that Wednesday of that week, there's an event in the morning that many of us will be at until 9 o'clock or so. But that week in general is not off limits.
What is that?
Cup of Compassion, Crisis Center.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What was it?
The Cup of Compassion
Oh.
for the Crisis Center down at Armature Works. So, council, what do you think?
Sure.
Sure.
I can do morning, I can't do that Friday morning, I'll be gone.
That would be tough for me too.
We
Friday.
try to traditionally do it on Tuesday mornings. I think our workshops.
But the
I'm
rest,
good there.
I'm not going to the crisis center.
Okay. We will, we'll schedule a date that works for everybody.
Okay, sounds good.
Second thing is, Councilmember Fernandez actually reached out to me maybe last week and was asking about our sort of our paving program and getting a status update on where we were. So I'm going to have Mr. Warrenfelds come up. He has a few slides to go through just to give the council and the public a status report on where we are with not only paving, but several of our capital projects.
Good evening.
City Council, Jason Warfeld, your Public Works Director. So slideshow I have here is going to talk about a few areas. First off is the ARPA projects. There are 4 of them currently that are in process. The first one is the stormwater improvement project at Breger Bannockburn. City Council approved this on October of 24. There was a kickoff meeting in November, and currently we have confirmed with the contractors that work is scheduled to begin in the next 2 weeks, end of January, anticipated to be completed prior to this year's rainy season. The second one, Maple River Hills, council approved that in October of 24, kickoff meeting in November. Structures are slated to arrive early February, with construction to begin at the same time when the structures start to arrive. The third one is the East 127th Lift Station rehabilitation. Council approved that in November. The kickoff meeting was held early January, and the contractor is currently sourcing the equipment for this. The equipment used to have a delay of up to a year. We're finding that the delays they're going away. So We're anticipating 3 to 4 months of work once they get kicked off and completed. And we will do the kickoff meeting for this later this week. So, the fourth one is the White Way Service Center. This is a utilities project under Director Tinch. Council approved it in July of '24. There was a kickoff meeting in September. The 60% plans are complete. Early this month, they are with the DRC currently for review. So that project, so all of these projects are slated to be completed in the timeline for the ARPA requirements. So they were all encumbered in December. They have a 2-year completion timeline, and they will be completed according to the knowledge today, so without any delays. Next up, capital projects in general. The Utilities Department has numerous other projects that are outside of what, as the Public Works Director, I'm involved with. The engineering component is different. They are involved. These are the projects that, as I sit with the engineers, this is what we talk about. Street resurfacing, St. Augustine was repaved in middle of December. There were some issues with the final surface. Some areas with driveways that had a higher pavement than they should have. So staff met with the contractor December 20th to address their concern, or to review the concerns. There was a social media post to the residents letting them know that we're aware of the issues. We're working through that. I've requested a second meeting to meet with the contractor, with the city engineer, and discuss the forward motion on this. This contractor is currently the low bidder on a next repaving project, the Bellevue Ferncliff Street. Their idea was they were going to wait, do the repair when they did the other street. I have a different thought on that, just because of the delays we experienced with the previous paving. So we're going to meet and discuss if we can do that a little sooner. That Ferncliff and Bellevue paving will be before City Council at the next meeting for consideration of approval. The Rec Center roadway design, the first consultant that was reached out to for this project, they could not meet the goals, the budget goals for this project. The city engineer went to the second consultant. There was a first submission that lacked some important goals of this project. They are currently reviewing the second submission, which will come before City Council, and then there will be a 3-month design on this. This project was budgeted for design in FY25 and slated for construction in FY26, so it appears to be on schedule. Stormwater project improvements on Brentwood. This project goes from Pinehurst towards River Hills. There was already a meeting with the consultant for a scope and fee, and that project is just for the design phase in this year. North 54th water main design. City staff are going to design that. The engineering department will do the design. The survey is complete. It was received last week. It's currently under review. The design is funded for FY25, and the project is going to be funded by the CDBG grant. The South River Hills Wooden Bridge is part of the Riverside project. I've met with Director Langfield about this, and the funds that were budgeted for this project are shifted to that project to make it one complete project.
Jason, Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes.
Just before you move on, I just want to clarify. I think, can you put the slide back up, please? And Finance Director Ingram, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the rec center, the design was in '24 and the funding for construction was in fiscal '25. Do I have that wrong?
I think there was 73,000 that we just approved to care concern. Got my big book out now. Sorry. We just approved 73,000 for the design to carry over into '25. So that's correct. I believe the construction, and I'm seeing if I can find it real quick. Actually, I've got my capital here. And I do believe the construction, let me look at the CIT. I believe that is on, this is the roadway. I don't see it in CIT. It may have been through unassigned fund balance.
I'm pretty certain it's in there. It probably is unassigned fund. I just want to, because it was, I think Mr. Warrenfeld misspoke briefly, no fault, it was just a slip of the tongue that he said it was 25 and 26, but it was 24 and 25.
And I believe that was around 750,000, yeah.
Correct, that's
That
correct.
is a 25. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Good. Other projects that engineering and public works are involved with is speed humps. In Q3 of FY '24, speed humps were installed in the Knights Branch neighborhood. Last week, I believe they completed the installation in the Sagebrook neighborhood of some speed humps there. The golf course hole 7, the hole 7 repairs are almost complete. There is a meeting tomorrow to go over the punch list items to finish that project out. And this photo here is from the riverside looking towards the golf course of the work that was completed. Street repairs, this was a topic that we talked about. Some of the utility repairs, there was some lull in getting the streets repaired quickly. These are 3 of the 5. Rain Tree at Fowler Avenue, West River at River Hills, and Gillette at Heatherton. These have all been patched along with the Whiteway 53rd Street area. Some of them are pending the striping that will need to be completed, and then there is one that is pending on South Glenarvan at River Hills that occurred a week or 2 ago. Paving was supposed to be today for that, but because of the weather, it was shifted to Thursday. Line striping, so the engineering department is working through line striping. In FY '24, they completed River Hills and Ridgeway west of 56th Street, and they are currently working through a task order to complete a little over 5,000 linear feet in the city of line striping. So this one here is Gillette and Whiteway. And the top is before and the bottom is after, and they're kind of, it's about as good a photo as we could get for that. Sidewalks, just repair, replacement, and grinding. So these 3 photos are indicative of what we're after. The one on the left is a current issue that we're having on 52nd Street. We are working through the quotes and trying to get this cleaned up. The middle photo is from a utility repair. Not all of that, but there were some other issues going on there. As Utilities is doing their meter replacements or their repairs, the engineering department and the streets department are going through and they're making some replacements as necessary. And then on the right, there's a photo of some grinding that was recently done. There was a bid put out, or a piggyback agreement with American Sidewalks to come through and do grinding in the neighborhood, Knights Branch neighborhood. They did grinding on over 4,000 linear feet and did the grinding on 1,000 locations in that neighborhood to reduce trip areas. School zone sign updates. There was recently a project completed on Ridgedale. The sign on the left is what the old sign used to look like, and the sign on the right is what they are now, lighted beacons that go along with the school times. So the Ridgedale, Belterre, and Woodmont streets all received the new lighted beacons. There is a lighted beacon to be installed at the Greco School from the southbound traffic lane. Should be later this spring. And then the mobility manual, which is pending. There was a meeting with the consultant to discuss updating the mobility manual. We will see the scope and fee for that next week. I've been in communication with the Community Development Department about this and the city manager, and we are looking to try and expedite this process to get the manual updated. And that is the update I have.
The mobility manual, that's the calculation of mobility fees for new projects that we talked about. Okay. Council member questions. Council member Schister.
Yeah, Going back to the St. Augustine project, and I'm not trying to micromanage anything, it's just a general question for future reference. We've had trouble with the vendor for the street. I realize that they're, in doing the surfacing, I realize they're the low bidder on subsequent projects, but at what point in time we have to go back and keep redoing these projects? Does that eventually negate them the ability to do a subsequent project regardless of the low bidder status?
It could, but in previous instances, the engineering department has allowed the vendor to fix their mistakes, and previous occasions they have corrected it. It's not the same vendor that I'm talking about. Previous vendors have been allowed to fix the city's concerns with their project and then continue on as a vendor. This is the exact same scenario. There's a concern with the quality of that product. We're going to allow them to come back and fix it. The next project will be managed a little differently. Currently, there is not a utility inspector today, but that's part of the problem that engineering had. Very short staff. There was only 3 or 4 of us at a time to be sitting at a project, monitoring it, making sure everything was perfect. Just didn't get there. So some of that onus is on us, just lack of time. But we're going to allow them to come back and fix it, and I believe we'll have a good product.
Okay. Second question then is the line striping. Are we doing it internally or subbing it out?
It is all thermal, so it is all outsourced.
Okay. And then last but not least, we discussed the wooden bridge down by the park before, and I thought we were going to get this taken care of in the current budget cycle. We got to be careful we're not creating a safety issue for ourselves. I get a lot of complaints from the people in that area who have to cross River Hills and then come back over just to get past the bridge. I just want to make sure that we're keeping that in our mindset.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that in our budget this year, we included dollars to repair or replace that bridge. In fact, our goal is to coordinate that repair or that replacement with the park project, because we're designing the park. That may not be the location for that connection anymore. It could be further into the park, depending on what comes out of the design. So we have the funds, council approved the dollars, we have the funds to repair it. But they may be part of the bigger ambitious design and construction of the park. We also funded the construction, so our anticipation, and we're having a meeting, Mr. Langfield's going to talk to that in just a moment, public meeting about this on Thursday. But our anticipation is as soon as we get to further along in the design, you'll see where those connections will be. And if we decide that we're going to keep that sidewalk open in that same way, then obviously we'll have to repair it where it is, but there may be a different approach altogether as part of the bigger picture.
In the meantime, it'll stay closed, obviously.
Yes, sir, it will still remain closed.
Okay.
There is a sidewalk on the other side of the street, if I'm not mistaken. Am I misspeaking when I say that?
There is, but there's a curve. That's at the curve on River Hills, and it's people are concerned making that go back and forth to try just to get back and forth from the school. Parents are concerned. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I thought we were going to do that individually as opposed to part of the moving it into the park project. Okay.
Any questions?
Yes, Councilmember Fernandez.
I wanted to ask you about the scheduling, the time period of the schedule for repaving or resurfacing for the roads, and then also what kind of schedule do we have for the line replacement? Like, do we do it on an as-needed basis, or do we have a schedule set and then we basically just move through the city according to that schedule?
So on the paving side of it, the current plan that's being followed is a previous pavement study that was completed prior to my arrival. That plan has reached the end of its age. So the city engineer and I are looking at updating the current pavement study, which would change the paving projections for the future. As far as the line striping, the city engineer takes care of the line striping based on a schedule of concern. So there are areas that are higher than others. For example, Whiteway and Gillette, that heavy pedestrian area, so that was done rather quickly.
But, so what I'm asking is, throughout the city, is there, like a continuous rolling schedule of where we just move through and we've got this, all the lines striping done, and then we move back again because we're ready to restart from the beginning, or do you just, as you drive around and inspect the streets, decide they need to be lined?
So it's a little of both. There are areas that need to be updated more frequently because of usage and volume of traffic, and then there is the aged out areas that will be in the cycle that come back around.
Okay. And for the sidewalks, I know we have been trying to grind down areas that are raised up or something and make them a little smoother, but we had a lot of trees. We had a lot of tree roots, and sometimes that's what's pushing the sidewalks up. And would it make sense in those specific areas of where the sidewalks are really out of alignment just because of all the roots, to use like a more flexible material? Like I see some cities where they use like a poured in place rubber as opposed to concrete. Would that help?
So some of the challenges are the ADA requirements around the sidewalks. So if you're pouring a movable product and it exceeds the percentage of elevation for ADA compliance, then we're at risk for issues. I've been working specifically today with the city arborist. Some of these trees that are in the right of way, they're causing so much damage that we're forced to remove the tree out of the right of way just because of where it's growing. Particularly there was a tree on 52nd Street today that he went to look at. We came to the agreement that it's not surviving because of the sidewalk, and the sidewalk's not surviving because of the tree. So we're going to replace both of them.
Okay, so, but I was just thinking that if it was possible to put something, a little more flexibility there, we wouldn't have all the problem where we'd need to grind down the sidewalks or replace them as often.
I mean, definitely something that, city engineer, we can look at, but I know the ADA piece is critical, that we make sure the travelability of the sidewalk is met for the standards.
Well, I know that poured in place rubber, at least my experience, has been used in playgrounds to be ADA, to make them more accessible. So, I mean, I know the product itself is an accessible product. It's just a matter of, would it work in this application?
Understand.
So, okay, those are the only questions I had.
Other questions for Mr. Warrenfelds? Thank you, sir. Good job as always.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The final thing I have, this final item this evening, is to ask Mr. Langfeld just to come up and talk about the design project, actually, that we were just speaking to.
Good evening, Mr. Langfeld.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Carl Langfeld, Leisure Services Director. I just wanted to take a moment to invite you all and members of the public to come to the Omar K. Lightfoot Center this Thursday night at 6 p.m. For a presentation from Half and Associates with regards to the riverfront parcels design status. If you all recall, last summer we approved an agreement with Half Associates to do the design and engineering work for the riverside parcels, which includes about 9 acres of that property on the river and around the Springdale Pond. They've completed all of their survey work and are at a point now where they're at about 30% plan completion, and have asked to hold this public meeting to present plans to the public, receive some public feedback and engagement, and start working on the next steps of the project. So please, Thursday night, 6 p.m. at the Lightfoot Center, come out, see what we've got. They've got some great ideas, they've got some great plans, some great things in the work. They've been working hard on this project since they got started middle of last year. So I hope to see everybody there on Thursday night.
Thank you, Mr. Langfeld.
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Chambers.
To the city manager, is this Thursday night meeting, is that going to be pushed out by our media team to all the different social media?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, media team.
Well, just to clarify, we're not transmitting it, we're not broadcasting the meeting.
No, I meant.
We're posting it, yes.
All the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, whatever we do. And the city signs, maybe? Okay.
Any other questions for?
Just on that one issue, the one item to park, if the planets were to align, when could we possibly be turning dirt on that?
Well, Mr. Langfeld probably has a better idea. He's been talking to designers more regularly than I have.
Good evening again. Preliminary estimates show turning of dirt very early 2026.
I just hate to beat the horse to death on that bridge, but I'm really concerned with that bridge, that's all. The safety issues. Okay.
And
thank you.
I mean, if we find that as we progress to the design that there isn't a need to relocate the bridge and the bridge can stay where it is, then we wouldn't have to wait. We could probably do it sooner. But right now, I think it'd make more sense to wait and just see how these things flesh out a little bit first, if the council is okay with that.
Good. City Attorney?
I have nothing.
So bear with me if you would before we adjourn. I should have brought this up under new business, but I just want to have a brief discussion. I think there's an opportunity for us to do a little better here. I was somewhat disappointed at our last meeting that we spent, I don't even know how long, an hour, hour and a half on the first reading of a fence ordinance. And it isn't, if there's a legitimate difference of opinion between the council members that we're haggling through, then so be it. I mean, sometimes these things can take 5 hours. We'll just take breaks and we'll go 5 hours if there's a difference of viewpoint. But what frustrated me was I don't think that was what it was. It was just we were going through the ordinance as though it was the first time we've, I'd like to encourage all of us, and I'm not picking on anybody, this is all of us. We generally do pretty good with this, but we need to read the backup material and create our punch list and meet with the city manager and the appropriate staff to get our questions answered as best we can before the meetings. Not so the public doesn't hear our questions, it isn't that, it's so that we can resolve these differences and hopefully get on the same sheet of music before we go on the public meeting, so that we look like we're all pulling in the same direction, or at least if we still have differences at that point, then so be it, then let's talk it out. But the result of that has been, how many dozens of people in the city are all fired up over hedges and the heights, and there's people pro hedges, con hedges, against hedges, for hedges. This could have easily been resolved before the meeting, and I'm not pointing fingers, shame on me for not, I mean, if I'd have caught some of that, I would have probably brought it up before the meeting. So it's not picking on anybody. That kind of thing can rob us of the speed with which we have been improving. It can take us back to the days when we have just a bunch of dust in the air. Facebook is, everybody's attacking everybody on it. We haven't had this in 3 or 4 years, and look at the speed with which we've been able to move things forward because of that. And again, if we reach a point where we're at a crossroads and I just don't agree with you on something, then fine, that's what we do. We can discuss and debate and take as long as we need. But that, I was frustrated with that because I didn't think we were arguing about issues that were germane. I thought we were just, it got to the point where we're just parsing every sentence of every paragraph. I don't know why I'm looking at you. I don't think you were here.
I was watching it.
Okay. So this is just my sentiment. I mean, as the mayor here, I'm just a 5th council member, and I realize that. I don't have any authority. But I think what we've been doing has been working so well, and we've been having such gain. I mean, we've moved the city further in the past 4 or 5 years than we've been able to move it in years before that. And I think it's because we've worked out some of this stuff ahead of time. We do our homework. We talk to the city manager. We flesh this out. And we do still have disagreements here, but they're generally fairly minor because we've worked through it ahead of time. So it's my 2 cents. And we can talk about that at the workshop that we're going to have at the end of February. It'd probably be a good time to kind of talk through that. And maybe we, when we have, we don't usually have these sweeping ordinances that are that big. There was a lot to talk about. Maybe we have a pre-reading workshop when they're that big or something along those lines to kind of make sure that we are still on the same page from a year ago when we talked about that.
Well, I think there were several aspects. One, we had a new council member who wasn't necessarily part of any of the past workshops. Two, sometimes it's different when you're reading it versus when somebody's presenting, and then you start to think about different aspects or questions. And I know when I ask questions, I don't necessarily want to have the city manager meeting prior to this meeting because I want to try to ask questions that I think people want to hear the answer to. So I don't want to have the answer necessarily. Sometimes I do have the answer ahead of time, but I think a lot of the conversation that's been happening on social media, if you actually read some of the posts, they are people that read the agenda but did not watch the meeting at all. So a lot of the posting that has come about is just people reiterating the comment that did not watch the meeting, so they actually don't have any idea what the outcome is. But there's not any way for us to weigh in on that and say, please watch the meeting, it's not what you think. But, I did weigh in and say, I really encourage you all to watch the council meetings or contact the city or a city council member so that maybe people would stop. But anyway, I don't know how, because I read the backup material too, but obviously sometimes you get here and things that you hadn't thought of before, or a council member asks a question and it kind of opens up a new set of questions for you. That one was kind of a detailed discussion, but I think it was unusual.
It was, yeah, it was. Councilmember Schisler?
I agree with your comments regarding the workshop. Something this large, we probably should have had a workshop just to get everybody back on the same page. Because as you said, it's been over at least a year since we had discussed it to begin with. And we had the ADUs coming up, and there was another one, signs, was it signs? I think that was the third one in that major group, that another workshop, so that everybody's on the same page with the same terminology and definitions of whether it's a shrub or grass or whatever. We flush that type of stuff out because not having been here, I was watching it, I guess it was relatively live. It just was a little like, why did we have a workshop on this? It's not an indictment on anybody. It's just that we need to make sure that we understand what we're dealing with when we come in. Then we can ask the questions and do clarifications for public edification. But I'm glad we're doing another workshop, but we probably could have done it for that one. It would not have hurt at any rate. It's a big
Just a learning opportunity for all of us as a team is all I'm saying. Okay.
I agree.
Anything else, council?
I just have one comment.
Absolutely.
And this is for the public. So, anybody watching, or if you know people who have concerns about the city, but maybe they haven't been watching the council meetings, I encourage them to watch them. And if they have concerns, to reach out to the city or a council member or the mayor, because sometimes some of the concerns expressed online aren't actually factual. And we, as council members, are not able to respond to things on social media because of sunshine laws. So, we're not necessarily able to clarify when there have been misconceptions or things that inaccurate information is being posted. So that's all.
Thank you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for your work. We sincerely appreciate it, and if there's nothing else, we will stand adjourned.